For our opening concert of the season, we have a very rich but very repertoire program for you. And we are opening it with extracts from Sibelius' suite Pelléas et Mélisande, which he wrote as incidental music for the play by Maurice Maeterlinck. Maeterlinck is perhaps today less performed than he was 100 years ago, but it's very easy to forget that he was one of the very leading European writers of the turn of the century. He was at the heart of the symbolist movement. The form of this music, although we are only playing some movements, is very different from, for instance, the music of the violin concerto. Sibelius is very aware that he is writing incidental music, and so there is a much more conservatism in the language, almost like dance movements. It reminds me sometimes of a dance suite of Bach. And of course, although the emotion is there, it is more contained because it is meant to be an accompaniment or a reflection between the texts. The great Finnish composer Jan Sibelius wrote only one violin concerto, indeed only one concerto for any instrument. But as he was particularly fond of the violin, being quite a good violinist himself, this is not surprising. Like Brahms, the first movement lasts almost as long as the second and third movements together, if not longer. And it is orchestral in conception, but one of the most remarkable features is that the soloist starts immediately playing. You just hear a few shimmering bars in the violins, and then he starts. There is no doubt that it needs an extremely skillful soloist to manage all its difficulties. Fortunately, we have a marvelous soloist, Barnaba's Kelemen, from Hungary, who was third prize winner of the Queen Elizabeth competition of 2001. The second movement is a more conventional slow movement, although very beautiful. But the third movement, which is a very rough dance, has been described by one eminent British musicologist as a polonaise for polar bears. In the second half of the concert, we will be performing Tsjaikovski's second symphony, known as the Little Russian. Probably it has its title because it contains many Ukrainian folk melodies. In those days, there were only very positive cultural links between Ukraine and Russia, and therefore Ukrainian folk melodies were as much part of the Russian tradition as of the Ukrainian tradition. With Tsjaikovsky, it was always a question of slow development. He was very inconfident at the beginning of the value of his pieces, and he was very self-critical. Even after the premiere of The Little Russian, he was not satisfied with its form, and he revised it considerably before he repeated it, and that's the form in which it's generally heard today. Despite coming from an upper-class family, Tsjaikovsky was almost always throughout his life chronically short of money. In this he was very lucky because fairly early on in his career he met, or rather he was seen by, a very wealthy widow called Nadezhda von Meck. She fell totally in love, not so much with the man but with the music, and she recognized the intrinsic genius in him. Sometimes she invited him to stay in her house, but she was never there. She would even walk in front of it, feeling his spirit, but they never actually talked. A unique event in the history of composers and their patrons. However, it produced many, many masterpieces. At first glance, one would not think that there are many similarities between Sibelius and Tsjaikovsky. They inhabit very different worlds, the landscapes are different, their musical personalities are completely different. But in fact, if you think geographically, they were not that far apart. They both believed very strongly in the absolute power of music, although in this sense Tsjaikovski was far more varied in that he wrote operas and ballets, more than Sibelius, who tended to concentrate more on orchestral pieces and chamber music. I think where they have a lot of similarity is in their extremely disciplined approach to orchestration, in the fact that they believed that melody must never be absent. However modern a composition, the three essential elements, melody, harmony, and rhythm, must be worked together in a very correct form so that the listener is kept constantly interested by the emotional thread going through the pieces.